we are creatures that are bound by time. We have minutes and hours and days and years, and we live our life. And, then we will die, and we will hopefully look at the face of our Father in heaven. But God himself is outside of time. So Christ is reality in a way at all times. He isn't bound by the things that we're bound by. And that means that if he is our reality, if Christ is our reality, that means what he said the first time he said it to his disciples is true for us now. And there's no reason for embellishment or changing the doctrine that he gave his disciples to follow. So just kind of keep that in mind. I'm interested by this idea of time and reality, and if you also have thoughts about that, I would love to hear them. But moving into verse 18. Do not let anyone who delights in false humility and the worship of angels disqualify you. Such a person goes into great detail about what they have seen. They are puffed up with idle notions by their unspiritual mind. That is really intense. I look at that and I'm like, whoa. People that are delighting in false humility. Well, what is false humility? Does anyone have an idea?
They can act humble in one situation and then go over to the person beside them and start talking about somebody else, something like that. But
Totally.
it's not a true humility.
Yeah. Anything else? How would anyone else describe false humility? Right?
It's like saying, oh, it was all God, but internally you're like, crushed it.
Yeah, I completely agree. So the next thing, worship of angels. That's the next thing that he kind of tackles. What does worship of angels mean? In a way.
The worship of good things that aren't God.
Mm-hmm. So Paul is immediately attacking the idea of people that are delighting in false humility. So they're delighting in not an internal change of heart, and they're also delighting in things that are not God. Like, God did create goodness for us to enjoy on earth, but he didn't create us to worship things other than himself. And with the way that things were happening in Colossae, the people were actually starting to tolerate and be influenced by the worship of other things. Heavenly beings, yes, angels are, but they weren't designed to be worshipped. So can you, kind of looking at this, the word that I got when I was reading it is like they were being persuaded. They were being persuaded to kind of change the original doctrine that Christ had set them and how they were to move forward in faith. Can you think of ways that we're persuaded by false teaching today? It doesn't have to be spiritually related, but can you think of ways that we are persuaded by false teaching, things that are untrue? We're told to worship and idolize things that are not God. How is that a part of our society today? Money will bring you happiness. Definitely.
I feel like we see it all in the Hollywood movies. You see all these they're living these extravagant lives and going through all these weird cool experiences and stories, and that's not how life works.
Mm-hmm. Like, I always think that busyness, everyone else is busy and you should be busy too, otherwise you're lazy, and a lot of people can think that way if they think that you're just kind of hanging out and not doing anything, that you're not being productive with your life. And they like to equate those two, which is something that I think our culture teaches us a lot, which is true.
Right. Even though all of those things might be important, like we're busy, meaning we work so that we can have an income to pay our bills, or going off of the money, we need money to pay our bills, but we're not supposed to begin to worship those things and set our eye on them. So I really like the end of this verse. It says, hold on. Okay, such a person also goes into great detail about what they have seen. They are puffed up with idle notions by their unspiritual mind. Now, when I see the word idle, we're going to start in the NIV and then we'll move to the other translations. But I remember the first time I saw the word idle, I had no idea what it meant, and I was sitting in the passenger seat of my mom's car, and she was driving. And we pulled up, and there was a sign right outside of a store, and it said, "No loitering, no idling." And I was like, "Mom, what does loitering mean? What does idling mean?" And she was like, well, loitering is kind of like when people are hanging out outside the shop. They're not really supposed to be, they're not really working for the store. They're not going about their way. They're just sitting there. And idling is when your car is just sitting there, you know? So they don't want people just parked outside running their cars, not really doing anything. They're not going in the store. They're just hanging out. And so I read this, and that's the first thing I thought of when I read this verse, is they're puffed up with idle notions. Well, if their notions are idle, their notions aren't moving. Their notions aren't growing them. What they're doing is not moving them forward. It's not even moving them backwards. They're stagnating with where they are right now. And when you see they're puffed up with idle notions. They're puffed up on going nowhere. Like, that's in a way how I read that. And they're not able to progress forward because they're focused on false humility, because they're focused on worshiping angels. They're not seeing the reality of what Christ had in store for them. They're embellishing it with their own thoughts. And so I really was just like, okay, you know, so the notions of false teachings are unspiritual, which it says, they're unspiritual mind, and they're not walking the people towards Christ. I was really, I went back to the first part of, I'm going to kind of put a couple things together, but the reading last week, which was the first half of Colossians, did a lot to warn us about what was happening right now. So, especially in verse 18, which we're looking at, it says, don't let anyone who delights in false humility in the worship of angels, you know, it's going through false teaching. Well, Colossians 2:4 warns us. It says, I tell you so that no one may deceive you by fine-sounding arguments. Colossians 2:8 says, see to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the basic principles of this world, rather than on Christ. Paul's like, hey, look back at Christ. Look back over there. That's what you need. You don't need to be persuaded or letting people basically deceive you with philosophy that is not of the word. So then I actually had a friend send this to me out of the blue, and I loved this because I really think it was a God thing. But she was like, Hannah, have you read 1 John 4 in a while? And I was like, no. So I went. And but this is all about false teaching, and this will kind of go into segue into our next one. So 1 John 4, 1 through 6, I'm just going to read it out loud. It says, dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. Because many false prophets have gone out into the world. This is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, but every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. Very clear what is from God and what is not. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you would have heard is coming and is now already in the world. You, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, meaning the spirits of this world. Because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. Living with Christ inside you gives you the ability to overcome the spirits that are within this world. They are from the world and therefore speak from the viewpoint of the world, and the world listens to them. We are from God, and whoever knows